Hello everyone and welcome to MVPDays Online July 2018 edition, and welcome specifically to my session on getting started with PowerShell for Office 365. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Vlad Catrinescu. I'm a SharePoint MVP since 2013 from Montreal, Canada, and I work as a product evangelist for a company called Valo Intranet. I also create a bunch of other video content out there, especially for Pluralsight. For those of you who don't know Pluralsight, it's an online on-demand training site. They have a bunch of courses on PowerShell, Office 365, Exchange, JavaScript, Photoshop, and almost everything else you can do on a computer. I'm also the author of two different books. One of them is called Deploying SharePoint 2016, and the other one is called Essential PowerShell for Office 365. For those of you on Twitter, you can find me at Vlad Catrinescu, and I also blog at absolute-sharepoint.com. So what are we going to talk about today? This session, at least the goal is to be 25 to 30 minutes long, so I'm not going to go deep into all of the things that you can do with PowerShell for Office 365. But we're going to talk about Azure AD, SharePoint, and Exchange Online, and I'm really going to help you get started on how to get the different modules, how to do some basic command lines, and give you guys resources if you want to learn more. So let's start with Azure Active Directory. The first thing that you have to do with PowerShell, when you want to do PowerShell for Office 365, is get the required modules. In the past, let's say you wanted to manage SharePoint with PowerShell. Most likely you'd just remote desktop into the server running SharePoint, you would have the SharePoint management shell running there, and you would have everything needed to run your command lines. With the cloud, we cannot simply remote desktop into the servers because we cannot remote desktop into the cloud. So we have to download certain modules. So we download the required PowerShell command lines on our computer. So let's start with how do we get the Azure AD PowerShell module. The Azure Active Directory module is hosted on the PowerShell Gallery, which is the central repository for PowerShell content from Microsoft as well as from the community. In order to download content from there, to download modules, you need to have PowerShell Get. Chances are, as an IT pro, you probably already have them, as PowerShell Get is included with any Windows 10 or newer operating system, Windows Server 2016 or newer, if you have the Windows Management Framework 5.0 or newer, or if you have PowerShell 6. So chances are that you already have PowerShell Get on your computer. If you're running on a client machine or server that doesn't have any of them, you can download the Package Management MSI from the Microsoft Download Center at the link that you see in the slides. Once you have PowerShell Get, you simply have to open up PowerShell as an administrator and then run the install module PowerShell commandlet and simply give the name of the module, which is Azure AD. So install module, name Azure AD, that will download and install the PowerShell module on your computer. In order to be able to have access to everything, you of course need to have your username and password as well as global admin rights in Azure AD. So how do we connect? First of all, we need to get our credential using the get credential commandlet and save the credential in a variable called cred in this example. Afterwards, we'll run the connect Azure AD commandlet and specify the credential parameter and the credential we just saved. Enough theory, let's go to the lab environment and let's see how we connect to Azure AD with PowerShell and take a look at some basic command lines that we can run with Azure Active Directory. I am now in the lab environment, so let me open up the PowerShell ISC over here. First thing I will do is I will run the cred equals get credential as we've seen in the slides. This will open up a pop-up asking me for my username and password. This pop-up is really dumb. It doesn't do any validation. You can really enter whatever you want inside and it will say, yes boss, I saved it, everything is good. And then you can run the connect Azure AD and give it the credential. You'll notice that in my lab over here, I actually do a cred password make read only, which I didn't cover in the slides. The reason why I have it is that if you only connect to Azure AD, it doesn't really matter. But when you connect to Azure AD, for security reasons, PowerShell will actually delete the password from the cred object you have. So this makes sure that kind of the object cannot be reused. Because I want to reuse the object, the credential object, as we connect to Exchange and SharePoint later, I will just run the make read only on the password. This way, the Azure AD module cannot delete the password from the object. As you see, I ran the connect Azure AD PowerShell commandlet, and when you don't see red, it means everything is good. No news is good news. So you see it got connected to Azure AD with the account Vlad at globalmantics.org, and I can find my tenant ID here, the domain, and everything. So let me clean this up, and let's first of all see a list of our users. If I run get Azure AD user, it will show me all of the different users that I have inside my tenant, both internal and external. I can filter by the user type, so if I only want to see the users that are inside my company and not external guests from Azure B2B or things like that, I can filter where user type equals member, or I can filter by any other profile property. For example, I can see all of the users that are in the research department. If I want to see all of the properties of a single user, I can specifically ask for the object ID, Jeff Collins at globalmantics.org, and then I can view all of the information about that user, such as is the account enabled or not, what are the different licenses assigned to that user, and really all of the different user profile properties. Now let's say I want to create a new user. When creating a new user in Azure AD, the first thing that I need to do is create a password profile. So I'll create a new password profile. The object is microsoft.open.azuread module password profile. I will then specify the password, which is MVPDays, and then I will also force the change of the password on the next login, so this user doesn't keep this password forever. I will then create a new user using the new Azure AD user PowerShell commandlet, specify the given name, surname, user principal name, is the account enabled or not, and any other properties really that I want to assign to that user. It seems that MVPDays was a bit too soft for the password policies that I have in this tenant, so let me run this again. I changed it to MVPDays July 2018. Let me run this again, and this time it should work. Got to love the demo effect, especially if it's on video, where all of the red appears in the PowerShell window. I can then set or update the user manager, for example, set Azure AD user manager for who? For Ben at globalmantics.org. And for the ref object ID, I can actually not specify a username. I really need to give it an object ID. So what I'll do is the ref object ID will be Vlad at globalmantics.org, so I'm getting that user account and only getting the object ID of that user. So you can update user managers. You can view all of the different licenses that you have inside your tenant. You see that in this tenant I have an Enterprise Premium, which is an E5 license, a Power Apps Individual, which is the free Power Apps license, Enterprise Pack, which is an E3, Enterprise Premium without conferencing, and a conferencing one. So really, I can view all of the different licenses that we have in this tenant. I can also get a bit more information. I can, for example, expand the property prepaid Unix and also select the consumed Unix. So this way I can already find out for how many Unix my company is paying of that certain license and how many I'm using. For example, the Enterprise Premium, which is an E5 license, my company is currently paying for 50 licenses, but we're only using 2. For the Enterprise Pack, which is the E3 license, company is paying for 25, but we're only using 9. This is a really good way to kind of constantly review how many licenses you have available before you go to financing, let's say because you need more. Or another example, let's say summer is coming up and your company decided to hire 50 interns. You can already look really quickly at how many licenses you have left, and if there's not enough for all of the new users, you can already start the process of acquiring your license before the users come in. So day one, when they come in, they already have the required licenses for them to start working. I can also view all of the different services. So let's say I'll select one of them and expand the property service plans. What this will do, and I'll make this just a bit bigger, it'll show me all of the different services included in that specific subscription. So I see that in the one that I have BPOS, To-Do, I have the Forms, I have Stream, I have Flow, Teams, Sway, and so on. So I don't have time to cover custom license and things like that in this session because it's only 30 minutes long, but you can really customize what services get assigned to every user and things like that by using PowerShell. Now let's go back to the slides and talk a bit about the other Azure AD PowerShell module and then SharePoint Online. So first of all, the other Azure AD PowerShell module. There are 2 versions of Azure AD PowerShell. You have the one that we have looked at, which is the stable production release, and there's also another one which is the public preview, which includes really the latest features which are not always stable or always, almost rarely, well documented, and it's subject to change before getting in the production release. If you ever want to play with the preview module or there's functionality in there that you need that's not in the stable one, the module name is Azure AD Preview. So you either don't install the stable one or you remove it and you run install module name Azure AD Preview and you're ready to go. Now that we've covered Azure AD, let's talk about SharePoint Online. The SharePoint Online PowerShell module is hosted on the Microsoft Download Center. So you need to go at the link in the slides and download it and install it on your computer. The requirements in order to be able to play with SharePoint Online, you need to be a SharePoint Online admin and you need to have the URL of the SharePoint Online Admin Center, which is always https the Office 365 organization name -admin.sharepoint.com. To connect, you need to get your credential as before and then run the connect SPO service PowerShell commandlet, give it the URL of the SharePoint Online Admin Center, which in this example that we looked at is globalmatics.org-admin.sharepoint.com, and give it the credential. It's that simple. So now let's go to the lab environment again, connect to SharePoint Online using PowerShell, and look at some basic commandlets. Great, so let me make this back to the normal size, and let me first go to my admin center. I see now that in my VM my security policies kicked in and it logged me out, but that's no problem. Let me log back in You see, I went to the SharePoint Online Admin Center, and this is the URL that we need. globalmantics org-admin.sharepoint.com. So in my PowerShell, I don't need to get my credential because I saved it before. I'll run connect SPO service, give it the URL that I have just mentioned, as well as the credential that we got before. Again, no news is good news, so if you don't see it in red, it means that it has successfully connected. What can we do? We can, for example, see all of our different site collections if you want to do reports on the number of site collection, things like that. The cool thing about using PowerShell is that it will also show you modern team sites, communication sites, group connected sites, which are not shown in the production admin center right now. They're shown in the beta version of the admin center, but they're not yet shown in the prod one. So if I look, for example, for this site, it doesn't matter, this one, Office 365 group SP Engage, when I look in the admin center, I scroll down to the bottom and I don't actually have it. In the current admin center, you cannot see any of the modern team sites, communication sites, or Office 365 group SharePoint sites. So PowerShell, if you don't have the preview enabled, is the only way to see them right now. You can also, for example, select some of the properties. So let's say, for example, show me the URL and how much storage every site is currently using. So if you want to maybe save this information somewhere for reporting, use Power BI, do trend reporting, or if you simply want to make sure that there's not a user that uploaded the 4K version of Game of Thrones in a SharePoint site, and that's consuming all of your pooled storage. You can quickly use PowerShell to find out which site collections actually use the most storage and contact the users if necessary, if it's out of control. What else can we do? We can change information about a certain site. So for example, let's say I'll get the site collection, I can change the title, I can change the principal owner, the site collection administrator. Maybe the old one left the company or there's a new SharePoint admin in the company. And I want to set that user as the main site collection administrator. I can also do that. I can also play with external sharing. So if I want to disable external sharing, and this can be confusing because the parameter name is sharing capability. So when I set sharing capability to disabled, it will actually not stop complete sharing. What it will do is that it will disable external sharing, but it will still allow users to share inside the company. The other options are external user sharing only or external user and anonymous. With anonymous, it will also allow users to create anonymous links so people can access files, edit documents without needing to log in before. I can also do some cool reports, let's say, on external users. So I have this commandlet right here, and again, due to time, I'm not going to cover it in detail, but I can run this and see all of the different external users inside my tenant. So I can quickly do reports on what external users have access to our SharePoint sites, and you can also get more advanced if you want to, like filter by site collection, what permissions do they have in each site collections, and things like that. Okay, that's it for SharePoint Online. Again, if you have any questions, don't forget to put them in the chat. I'll try to answer as soon as possible. And now let's go back to the slides. We have between 5 and 10 minutes left, so let's talk about Exchange Online. To connect to Exchange Online, you need to be an Exchange Online administrator, and that is about it. You don't need to download the module because the way that connecting to Exchange Online works is that we actually create a remote PS session to Exchange Online. So I create a variable called session, run the new PS session commandlet, config name Microsoft Exchange, give it the connection URI, which will be the same for everybody except if your tenant is in Germany or China. That's when your connection URI would be different. Give it my credential, authentication basic, allow redirection, and finally import the PS session in my current session. This makes sure that every time we connect to Exchange Online, we'll always have the latest version of the commandlets ready to use. Like I said, if your tenant is operated by 21VNet in China, you'd use this connection URI, and if you're in Office 365 Germany, you would use the one that I have here in the slides. Now that we've seen the basics on how to connect, let's go and take a look at how to connect to Exchange Online and some basic Exchange Online PowerShell commandlets. Back in the lab, let me clean this up and let's first of all connect. So what I'll do is I will run this part, so new PS session, configuration name, connection URI, credential, authentication basic. You can see right away that PowerShell ISC is downloading the module, and it gives us a small warning just saying that some of the commandlets include unapproved verbs, which simply means that the Exchange team didn't follow all of the PowerShell best practices, so some of the commandlets might not be using the verbs that you're used to. That's it, nothing to worry about. So what can we do? First of all, let's say we want to see all of the different users in our tenant. I can run a get user, show me the user principal name, recipient type, recipient tables, and format it as a table. If we look at the details, let me just go a bit higher here. You see I have the user principal name, the recipient type, and because of the actual how zoomed in I am, it didn't show me all of the details because I'm a bit too zoomed in to make sure that you guys can actually see the text. You can also get the mailbox and again filter by multiple properties, show different properties, everything that you need. You can, for example, see the display name. Is it a user, a shared mailbox, a discovery mailbox? What is the prohibit send receive quota? So what is the max size of that mailbox? You can create mail contacts, you can set mail contacts, set mail tips. You can also, let's say you're doing a user offboarding script, you can set mailboxes to, for example, hidden from address list, deliver to mailbox and forward, set the forwarding address, things like that. You can even, for example, set out of office replies on certain users. So let's say a user quit the company or a user simply had an emergency and is now sick for an extended period of time. You might want to set an out of office message for them to let everybody know because they might not be able to do it themselves. So using PowerShell, you can easily automate those kind of things. I see that we are already over the 25-minute mark, so I'm not going to go deeper. Just wanted to cover a few resources for you guys. One of the resources you have is, of course, Pluralsight. There are 2 courses on Pluralsight about PowerShell for Office 365. One of them is more basic, the other one is a bit more modern. You have the Hey Scripting Guy blog, which I'm sure if you ever did PowerShell or if you ever Googled anything about PowerShell, you've heard about it. It's a great blog, daily blog about PowerShell resources. You have a book on Amazon called Essential PowerShell for Office 365 that kind of starts you off with the basics and goes to really advanced topics. And on my blog, you also have a blog post with resources to learn Office 365 in which I share a lot more different resources. So that is it for this session. Thank you guys very much for attending. If you have any questions, I'll be in the chat for the session for a while to answer them. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at Vlad Catrinescu. Connect with me on LinkedIn. just search for my name. I think there's only one Vlad Catrinescu in the world. Feel free to follow my blog and also to check out my courses at Pluralsight. Thank you guys very much for listening to this session, and I hope you found it informative.